created in the image of God. Today we have an special guest, Laurie. Sandra, I'm the producer of the show. Our host is on his way. He will be joining us really, really soon. But in the meantime, I would like to know, Laurie, and something about your background. If you can tell us more about you.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I was raised in a small town in Iowa, Ottumwa, Iowa, and my both my parents were school teachers as I was growing up. My father had gone to seminary, but he just felt like God told him to wait, and so during the waiting, he became a teacher, and my mom was also a teacher. I have an older sister, and I had a great childhood. It was wonderful. My dad finally started a church when I was in, I think fifth or sixth grade, and I was just submersed in church my whole life. It was very common to me. Mom and dad kind of took us everywhere. It wasn't their ministry. They certainly made it our ministry. And so if they were called off somewhere, we always tagged along with them. And I never really felt that separation that a lot of PKs do of, their dad being pulled away to this, that, or the next thing. And the kids kind of left out. They really, really made it an important aspect of our life to be a team and all of us in it together. And so, yeah, I mean, um, I think my childhood was a sweet childhood. Um, Mom and dad were very supportive of anything my sister and I did. Um, they were very hands on. My dad was the coach of my softball team, and and looking back on everything that they did, it was pretty incredible that they had the time to do that. But um, they just made us a priority along with pastoring and being leaders of the church. And I think that blend really helped me see God in a very accepting way, very loving way. I was never um, mad at the church, mad at God, growing up, like taking my mom and dad and stuff like that. So there was a sweetness with it, and definitely a family atmosphere where church was concerned. Um, Ottumwa is very small. It's about 30,000 people, or it was when I was growing up. I don't know if it is anymore. But even though it was a very sweet environment, I don't know very many people who can walk through life without some trauma here and there. And my life was not any different. So um, my babysitter's husband molested me when I was 4. And so my babysitter came in and saw him and started yelling at me. And so she pulled me away from him and dragged me down the hall. And she was yelling and what a bad girl I was, what a dirty girl I was. And then she proceeded to spank me. And she told me that if I told my parents, that they would no longer love me and that they would not want me anymore, that I would be in bigger trouble than I was now. And so I kept that to myself for years and never mentioned a word of it. And looking back, the trauma of that was instrumental in some of the ways, definitely how I saw myself, some lie-based beliefs that I came to believe, and how I felt. and decisions that I made moving forward. I always loved God. I always believed in Him, never blamed Him for anything, but it definitely tainted how I saw myself and how I moved forward in life. Um, when I was 21, my sister and I were living in Milwaukee at the time, and we had gone out for ice cream. I don't even remember what brought on the conversation, but we started talking about when we were kids and stuff like that. And I told her what happened. And she was, of course, horrified. And she's like, "We got to tell mom and dad." And I said, "No, no, no. It's so long. I'm 21. It's like long forgotten. And we need to just let it go. And they don't need that burden. They don't need that." And so I made her promise that she wouldn't say anything. So that weekend, my parents were at a conference, I think, in Springfield, Missouri, where they went to school. And they were at a banquet table with a bunch of other people. And one of the women at the table said, "We just found out this weekend that our daughter had been molested when she was a child." And as she said that, the Holy Spirit spoke to my mom and he said, "So did Lori. And you need to go to Milwaukee. You need to talk to her." And so she and dad talked about it later. They called us and said they were on their way. They wanted to spend some time with us. And it was just odd because they didn't just happen to show up often unannounced without, any plans. But they came and we were sitting around our living room in our apartment, and they told us, what had happened that weekend. And they said, "We know that that had happened to you too." And I looked at my sister and she's like, "I didn't say anything." And I said, "Well, how did you know?" And mom said, "I really felt like the Holy Spirit just told me that that happened to you too." And so I went through the whole thing with them. And my dad said, "You need to forgive yourself." And I was instantly angry. And I said, "I didn't do anything wrong." And he said, "I know you didn't, but your 4-year-old person inside of you thinks you did. And you need to forgive yourself." And I'm so grateful that he had that insight and had me do that. And I did. And I could feel the change almost immediately within myself. Now, I think it took a long time to walk that out and to really fully be healed from that. And it was never an identity. It wasn't anything that very many people even knew about. It wasn't something I ever talked about. In fact, me talking to you about it is kind of a big deal. But I truly believe that walking through that and feeling the compulsion that that lie-based belief created in my life at times, feeling the mindset that it created, really helps me understand when people come with, "Well, I'm feeling like this, and I don't know why I act this way, and I don't know." And these compulsions, I can understand a whole lot better because of what I have walked through myself. I'm sorry, Wade, I can't hear you.
I was just going to say, first of all, thank you for being here, for sharing so openly. Thank you, Sandra, for being here. I do hope you'll stay. I feel like it was meant to be that you were here to open the show. I was completely not expecting this. Dr. Lori and I have talked about the show and prepared for it. I didn't know that you would be sharing something so personal, but wow, that does help us to instantly empathize with you and your desire to help and heal others, and where some of that desire and that inner awareness comes from, that is so necessary and so healing if you're trying to help other people. I have to ask, is this something you've you've shared elsewhere, and is it something that was really difficult to ever talk about? How does it feel opening up in this way and sharing that?
Well, it's extremely vulnerable. I mean, anytime you share something that touches your life to the extent that something like this does, it is very vulnerable. Um, my family knew, of course, my husband and my children, but it wasn't something that I would bring to light unless it would help the person that I was talking to. Um, Sometimes people who have gone through childhood trauma, um, knowing that the person that they're talking to has had similar or other childhood traumas too, can help them um, open up a little bit easier. Um, it is definitely a process. Sometimes, God can heal you in an instant, and if He chooses to do so, and sometimes the healing comes through time. Um, I believe that He has recently. I was just reading a book called Transformation Prayer Ministry. Have you ever heard of that?
Not specifically, no.
Um, and another counselor of mine, he recommended it, and he's like, this concept and walking through peeling off layers is just amazing. And so I started reading it, and as I was reading it, there was the introductory of lie-based beliefs. And these are beliefs that happen when maybe trauma comes. Like the trauma that came to me, my lie based belief was I was dirty, I was broken, there was something wrong with me. And so that lie based belief had to be changed and it had to be rectified. But the only person that can ever change that within another human being is God. And laying that at His feet and allowing Him to then come in and tell me, okay, what is the truth about me? And changing that within me was when my complete healing came. And as I was going through this book again, there was something that I read, and it was this lie based belief, and it said, I am stupid. And as soon as I read it, I just felt this heaviness on me. And I thought, do I feel like I'm stupid? And I just put the book down for a minute and I thought, do I feel like I'm stupid? Yes, I do. I feel like that is a belief within me. And so I started reading the book again, and it just kind of walked you through the process of taking that lie-based belief, those feelings that surround it. And I love how in the book he says that our feelings are not good or bad, but they're indicators. And so when you're feeling these strong feelings of pain or worry or anxiety, or even that, oh, yes, I truly feel that I am stupid. So as I was walking through this, I thought, okay, well, where did this come from? And I remember being in a kindergarten, and my kindergarten teacher, she had all of her these little houses, and they all looked the same, and they were all stuck all over the wall. And if you said your address, she gave you the house, and you learned the lesson. So she told us all to go home, look at our house, learn our addresses. So I went home, and I remember standing in front of my house, and I was saying my address over and over. And I said, it's a white house. It's got brick. It's got black shutters. And I said my address again. And, I felt really confident. Well, I went to school, and this teacher was really stern. And she made me nervous. And so when she called on me, she had us all stand up, And so she called on me, and I stood up, and She's like, okay, what's your address? And as soon as I opened my mouth to say my address, my brain went blank and I could not remember my address. And I'm like, and she's like, okay, sit down. So then she called some other kids and they got their little house off the wall. And so day after day after day, I would go home and I'd stand in front of my house and I'd say my address. And I'd go back to school and she'd have me stand up and she's like, what's your address? Well, after like the third day, she was like, Lori's stupid. And she said, Lori doesn't even know her address. And I was just like, but I know my address. I know my address. And inside of myself, I'm thinking, you know your address. You know your address. Well, this went on for quite a while. One time she had me standing on the chair and I couldn't remember that. It just went on and on and on. Finally, she just took my little house and she ripped it up, threw it away. Now it's love, the end of that. And well, it birthed a lie-based belief in me. And that lie-based belief had to be changed by God. And thank God he did. He's faithful. And he did.
Well, I'd like to just make a couple of comments here. And again, thank you so much for sharing so openly. And the first one is, we all grow up in different cultures and at different times. Mm-hmm. I'm of a certain age where, as a child, it was still acceptable, perhaps even in some circles believed effective, to sort of shame children, right? Yeah. To goad them, to get their attention and emphasize the importance of something. And it just occurred to me, because we're really into regenerative farming and gardening, and we have camps in this program called Soul Seeds, and we're really doing a lot of thinking about plants, because everything goes back to the Garden of Eden anyway, and we think about that all the time. And I'll get to another thing from the Garden of Eden in a moment. But I just imagined this little plant, right? This little plant that if you bend it, it'll like kill the little plant. But if you can imagine that you would bend it but not kill it and just cripple it, I was just imagining, don't take this the wrong way, you as a little plant that was like twisted and bent at that moment, right? We are so impressionable and so tender.
Yeah.
And yet adults that don't have that training or that awareness or that skill set, and I'm guilty of it as well with my own children, as loving and gentle as we want to be, or maybe some don't even want to be, don't even think, you think that it's good to be, tough
Right.
love kind of thing. But at that tender young age, real damage is being done in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we're resilient. Kids are resilient. They can take a lot, but some things stick. Some things hurt. Some wounds are deep. And I'm glad you can laugh at it now too, because, it doesn't help to sit and, as you mentioned, sort of obsess. Actually, I think it was we were maybe talking about this beforehand, before the show, obsess about something and not be able to let it go. Right.
Yeah.
But of course, there are reasons for that. There are learned behaviors that the tender young plant will adapt to or not adapt to, or coping mechanisms, that help us cope with the issue.
Yeah.
But then that's a kind of a crutch that we bear, or a handicap that we have.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I was thinking of from the Garden of Eden was the serpent, right? And lie-based beliefs. The whispering of the serpent that is almost true, has a kind of truthiness to it, but the seed of doubt is planted, the seed of deviation away from the path of God is planted in that whispering moment. And throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, we see how the serpent, whose only power is to whisper and to influence, grows up to become a dragon wreaking havoc when enough people believe in those whispering lies, those lie-based beliefs. Mm-hmm. And when a society gets created and a family, a tribe, or a nation becomes dysfunctional because of those lie-based beliefs, and then we create the dragon from the whisperings of the serpent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Political power is wielded in horrific ways, and we've seen that over the last several hundred years with the different political ideologies and regimes and governments and dictators and ideologies that have taken root, lie-based beliefs, that have taken root and destroyed millions of people and entire regions of the planet.
Yeah.
But it starts with, learning how to treat those tender young people, and my sincere sympathy for what you went through, but I'm really so honored that you're here sharing it with the audience.
Yeah. No, not a problem. Childhood wounds can bury themselves pretty deeply. And if we don't recognize and admit, it was that admittance of, do I think I'm stupid? Oh yeah, I think I do. Holding a doctorate, 2 masters. Do I think I'm stupid? Yeah, I think I do. And as many times as my husband lovingly says, no, you're not. No, you're not. How can you think that? Those lie-based beliefs really just surpass our intellect, because in my intellect I know, well, okay, I've earned these things. I know how to read. I know how to do these things. But it surpasses that because it's in our hearts, and it's what our heart believes. And
Well, and at the same time, it could be a factor that led you to prove in that sense that you're not, by pursuing those degrees. And so it can become grist for the mill. It can become a catalyst. Of course, that's never a reason to do it or to say that it's an okay thing, or heaven forbid, a good thing to sort of deal with children that way. It would be much better, life will deliver those things. Or Jesus said offenses will come, but woe unto those who deliver those offenses, right? Better to have a millstone hung around your neck. So maybe the offenses will come, and it's all part of the training. We all have to grow. God allows it. He will heal it. He will allow it to happen, and then he will heal it, and he will turn it into good. But woe unto those who are responsible for it.
Yeah, that's the truth. That's the truth. And I loved how you said he will heal it. And that's really the main point of sharing just these two aspects of, my journey, is that on both of those, God healed them both. And yes, he did turn them for my good, but hopefully he's turned them for other people's good too. And gives me the empathy and the bandwidth to be able to, help those people that come to me.
Well, that's a perfect segue to the first commercial break, which is a little video about Dr. Lori Schoessler. So let's watch this, and when we come back, we'll find out a little bit more about what she's doing now, how those early experiences from her own creation story, her own path, have led her to and empowered her to be the healing counselor that she is now. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of Dr. Lori Schoessler.
Meet Dr. Lori Schoessler, a licensed clinical Christian counselor, speaker, and author with over 25 years of ministry experience. She's the founder of New Leaf Christian Counseling and holds a doctorate in clinical Christian counseling, bringing both depth and compassion to the work she does. Dr. Lori specializes in temperament therapy, a personalized, biblically grounded approach that helps people understand their emotional design and heal from the inside out. Whether working with children or adults, she helps individuals uncover the root of their trauma, anxiety, or relational struggles, and guides them toward lasting transformation. Her voice is warm, grounded, and deeply insightful, perfect for conversations around faith, mental health, emotional resilience, and identity. As someone who bridges spiritual truth with practical tools for healing, Lori offers meaningful value to listeners seeking clarity, hope, and change. An inspiring and thoughtful presence, Dr. Lori brings the kind of depth that makes every conversation feel personal, purposeful, and full of grace. Contact her through the website newleafchristiancounseling.net.
Well, welcome back to Created in the Image of God with Dr. Lori Schoessler. So tell us about that transition then, from having had those childhood experiences, and I appreciate that you shared, a lot of the positive and the warm, loving family and the church relationships that you had, as well as the challenges that you had. But where did that pivot point and that transition come to take those experiences and move in the direction that you did towards counseling and getting those degrees?
Well, I worked for a church in Illinois. My family and I moved there, and I worked there for about 19 years. Was just a volunteer for most of those years, and then in the very end, I was on staff there as a children's pastor. And more families were coming, with more and more needs where their children are concerned, and this. Knowing inside of myself, I need to be educated where counseling is concerned. I need to be able to meet these people where they're at. I need to be able to help these children. And so after those 19 years, we moved to Georgia. And as soon as we moved here, I just knew that that's really what I was supposed to focus on. So I got a job at a Christian school, and I started taking classes and earned my degrees and was the counselor at this little Christian school. And I just loved it, absolutely loved it. And so when my time there was finished, it just made sense that I just open a practice of my own and do it full time. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Wonderful. So tell us then a little bit about the basis or the methodology that you use regarding the temperaments. I mean, maybe give a little background of what they are, where it comes from, and why you feel that is, a good approach to use.
Yeah. Well, I got trained through the National Christian Counselors Association, and they are temperament based. And so temperament's been around for over 2,400 years. They've been talking about temperament through, looking at bile and fluids and different things.
And was it the Greeks that began to look into that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they
Our philosopher friend, Dan Sanderson, who was an original co-host, may have something to say about that. I don't know if he's in the audience tonight, but anyway, go ahead.
It's okay. They saw these groupings of people that just responded the same ways, had the same, likes and dislikes. And so they knew that there was these groupings of people. But we know today that it's not through bile, it's through how God made us. And so there's this, you're sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholy, caloric, and supine. And so with the NCCA, Dr. Richard Arnold, when he was doing his dissertation, he was doing hundreds and hundreds of different surveys on people to figure out their temperaments. He kept finding this one that didn't quite fit in with the others. And so he developed the supine. And the supine is unique in that it is, it can swing between being people person and doing tasks, where sanguines do not like tasks and they're very, very people. Melancholies, they love tasks. They love the strategy of it. This is how you do it, but they don't want a whole lot of people in their life. They'll choose just 3 or 4, maybe 1, to be their tribe. So the supine has a very gentle nature. It is a servant's heart. They're able to see and feel people's emotions. They're the ones that can walk in the room and read the room. The sanguine, when they walk in the room, woo, they are the room. Melancholics don't want to walk in the room. They would rather stay in the hall. Calorics usually have, everyone around them. They're talking about the big picture. They know exactly where they're going. They're leading the way. And then you're phlegmatic, so you're more steady, even-keeled. They're great with seeing both sides of an argument. They just know how to get those two people right down the center of that argument. And that seems to be their superpower. Phlegmatics can operate in hostile environments and very good environments, and nothing seems to rattle them at all. They're those people that it's like, yeah, no matter what happens, they're always the same. That's a phlegmatic. So just learning these and seeing, um, those different temperaments at work and then relating to each other, that's where the friction usually comes in. So when I meet with people, I do a temperament test if that's, the direction that we're going. Sometimes with childhood wounds, I do not do that. I go a different route. But if there's just conflicts in their life, trouble at work, trouble at school, I would do a temperament test on them, and we would start seeing what is causing this friction. Now, with the NCCA, they look at 3 parts of the person. They look at inclusion, which is intellectual and surfacey relationships. They look at control, how much control you want over your life, how much control you want over others' lives. And they look at affection. So actually, we can be 3 different temperaments because we are so, we have so many layers to us that to say, well, I'm a melancholy. Well, you might be, or you might just be a melancholy in affection, and you might be something else in inclusion and control. And so being able to see all the person, the whole person, and as we're going through our temperament, we can switch in between the 3 so quickly that sometimes people will say, well, I don't really think that that's who I am. Well, when I start asking pointed questions like, well, how do you like to relate with your husband? How do you like to be treated with your husband? Then they start saying, oh, well, okay, when I'm in affection, then I am that way. But when I'm at work, I'm not like that at all. Well, no, you're not. You're in inclusion when you're at work. So you're operating out of a different part of your soul. But it's very, very interesting. And I've done it on kids as young as 6. And it is amazing how when I talk to their parents later, they're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. That's exactly him. So it does bring a lot of light to, I now understand why they act the way that they act.
Yeah, there's so much going through my head right now because I shared with you that when I was in the ministry, I was also getting certified in Christian counseling. There were different inventories and things being used, and I was in Europe at the time, in Germany. But I remember in the late '80s, reading books on temperament and just using that in discussions, right? Not in a formal way, not through a formal assessment,
Mm-hmm.
but as a way to gain a little bit of detachment. And while some people feel judged by, that as a label,
Yeah.
most people could relate to it in a way to look at themselves in a little bit of a detached way and look at others in their life with a little bit more detached understanding and empathy. It was a
Yeah.
little bit less personal when it was a mode of behavior
Mm-hmm.
that people have and use, or is even a part of them more than a mode of behavior. But so I'm intrigued and interested right now. I'm just kind of talking off the top of my head, but I'm intrigued and interested to know how you counter those arguments about maybe coming from a place of, no, you don't get to judge me, you don't get to put a label on me. I'm so much more than what you're trying to characterize me or make a caricature of me.
Yeah.
And how do you kind of get past that? And then are there aha moments and people that then greatly benefit from it once they get past that?
Well, usually when people come to me, they're seeking this. So it's not like I've ever foisted this upon someone. In fact, I'm very, very careful because once someone knows I'm a temperament counselor, they're like, "Oh, what's my temperament?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"I don't know. You haven't taken the test, so I'm not going to guess." Well, as you know, I'm interacting with them, and I can kind of see some of the temperament personalities and traits coming out, and I might have it in my mind, but I'm really careful not to just, oh, you're a you're a such and such. No.
Well, because there's a huge diversity. It's not like there are, you're saying, well, there are four types of people, but that's an oversimplification, right? And
Yeah.
then we all have learned behaviors and coping mechanisms and ways that we found to apply who and what we
Yeah.
are to a given. It's like, the most basic of tools, there's 100 uses. I mean, I can't even count the ways I've used a screwdriver, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. And because we're not just looking at one part of us, but we're looking at three, they could be operating out of a control area and not an inclusion area. And so it's not right for me just to throw out a label. Just like I'm cautious when people say, "Well, I'm a melancholy." Well, okay, you might be, and you might be a blend of a lot of things. I had one little boy that came to me, and I had also had him in class, and it really helped a lot when I would counsel kids, and I also had this relationship with them already because I had them in class. And so this little boy came to me, and he took the temperament survey, and he came back with melancholy across the board. Well, I'm his teacher, but now I'm counseling him. And so the first thing I did was bring in my credentials because melancholies are rather distressful. And so I showed him, this is where I got this, and this is this that I earned. And he's like, okay, all right. Well, he's known me for 2 years, but he needed to know me in this area of my life, not as a teacher. What qualifies you to be meeting with me right now? Okay, you're a
And
melancholy.
a sanguine doesn't really care about that because they like you.
No, they don't. In fact, in my office, I had a desk right beside a chair right beside my desk, and it was just inches from my arm usually. And then I had a couch across the room. And my melancholies would come in and go right to the couch, as far away from me as they could get. My sanguines would come in and they would scooch the chair around right next to me, and they would lean in and they would get as close to me as they possibly could. And if I didn't, reach out and touch their hand every now and then or pat them on the shoulder, man, they would feel like they weren't liked. But doesn't she like me? But as soon as I pat them or something like that, then they'd be all smiles and. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, I know the answer to this question, and we often put the questions till the end, but in case Amelia isn't sticking around for the whole show, let me throw this out there now. Amelia writes, my mother is in Canada. Would you be able to possibly take her on as a client remotely? She has some trauma, childhood trauma, sexual abuse. So the question is, how and where do you work with those who want to have your help?
Yeah, I do remote counseling through online. And for locals that want in person, I meet with them in person also. I do not have an office right now. I'm relatively new in my little business. So I meet with people in the library right now, and it works out quite nicely.
Right. You mentioned that when we were talking earlier, it gives just a little bit of a sort of public safety net that it's not both for you and for them. There's always a concern, bringing people into your home one-on-one.
Oh yeah.
I remember when, and I'm sure you know this from your upbringing, in the ministry, I was not allowed to meet with a woman in particular alone. There always had to be another person there because of even just things that could be implied, even the appearance, or perhaps things that could be said that might or might not be true. And the next thing you know,
it gets dicey. I mean, you want to be respectful for people's privacy, but at the same time, like you said, if I'm meeting with a grown man, for the sake of both of us, that glass wall is quite nice. into the rest of the library. Yes, it's private and nobody can hear what we're talking about, but it's like a fishbowl. And
Yep.
yeah.
So, you said you're relatively new, but of course, as you mentioned earlier, you had a lot of training in other settings, right?
Yeah.
School, church. How long did it take you to get those credentials overall, the
Oh my
degrees
goodness.
and whatnot?
I think I've worked on them for decades, to tell you the truth. It's, you start on a master's here, and I was a mom at the time. I'm a wife and a mom, and so you still have life that you're involved in too. So it takes a minute to get that finished. And then with my doctorate, again, I was working at the time, so it probably took me far longer than it should have. But I had a lot of fun though. It was just learning all of that and then being able to put it to practice. And with my dissertation, I had to do 35 case studies. And so I think 32 of them were children.
Oh,
Yeah. And so just going through those once again and reliving all that time with those kids, that was a lot of fun. And writing, that was a lot of fun. So
so along the way, over the course of that,
mhm,
what would you say? I'm assuming that in one sense or to some degree or another, you went from learning
mhm.
to wisdom, right? So you went
Hope so.
from, studying
Yeah.
to really comprehending and mastering. What was that like, sort of the aging of the wine, if you will, as you studied and practiced and
Yeah.
studied some more and practiced? And how did that change and morph? And where did you start and where did you arrive at the end of the studies?
Um, I still think back on my first official session with a child. And I really wish I could go back and do it again. I mean, you just think, oh, dear Lord.
Yeah, you need to learn too. You need to forgive yourself for that.
You do. And it wasn't a train wreck or anything. In fact, the
Oh,
child did.
I sit here and I'm in agony thinking about how I treated my 2-year-old son, right? And I was an older dad even then, and I had perhaps more wisdom than my father did. But still, I'm like, really? I was that harsh with him when he was 2? Yeah, I
Yeah,
was,
yeah, I
right?
know.
I remember this one scene where I was trying to like force him to do something and he didn't want to do it. And I was like, we never used corporal punishment on our children. We didn't believe in that. But just the intensity of me trying to sort of verbally coerce this child to do what I wanted him to do, and he wasn't having any of it.
Yeah, yeah, been there. So yeah, I mean, it
But the point is, it wasn't something that I should have gotten. It was like the principle of the thing, and it wasn't the time to die on that hill, honestly, as I think back.
it is amazing what we can make really important.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I mean, I think that I am still growing and I'm still learning. Thank God that I am. And with every person that I meet with, I believe that I walk away with more confidence, but also more knowledge and more wisdom. And if I didn't, if I didn't have the Holy Spirit, there is I wouldn't do this job. I just wouldn't. It would be too hard.
It would be too draining, right? Where
Yeah,
the river of living water
yeah,
has to have that input.
yeah.
So some people, they're not giving enough. You know what I mean? And that's the problem.
Hmm.
Others, they would bleed themselves dry too much and wring themselves out and have nothing left to give if
Yeah,
that
and
inflow wasn't there.
there's been, I mean, more times than I can count that as I'm listening to the person and I'm thinking, okay, This is what I think. This is what I think they're expressing. This is what I think the issue is. This is what, and as soon as I just quiet myself and listen for the Holy Spirit to show me exactly what's going on there, and he gives me something to say, and as soon as I say it, they're like, oh, yes, that's exactly what I was, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I walk away with, oh my goodness, thank you, Lord. Because I was so off within my own reasoning and with my own understanding, I would have been so off. And without his wisdom and without his guidance, I would have missed it. Now I can love them. I can listen to them. I can even commiserate with them. And sometimes we need that. In fact, a lot of times we need that. And so I think that's really a lot of what I bring to the table. But the Holy Spirit is the one that really gets things done. I'm not the one that gets things done. He's the one that really gets things done.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
I'm so grateful.
Well, I'll conclude this segment with this sort of comment, thought, and invite you to respond. You've brought up frequently over the course of this short interview, we could go on for hours, children, and it just occurs to me how that childhood experience that you shared at the beginning of the show probably really plays into that deep, heartfelt desire, whatever the child is going through, and they may not have experienced anything like what you did, right? But the ability to reach into that young, tender heart, that young, tender plant, and sort of help that get straight and to grow straight, right? To point back towards the light if it's sort of wilting in the hot sun or covered by the shade or whatever it is that little tender plant is experiencing. So that leads into the next section right after this commercial break. Where are you growing next? Right? So I don't know if you want to comment on anything that we've covered, and then when we come back, you can talk about that, or do we just go to the commercial break?
Well, one thing before we go, you mentioned, speaking into the lives of children, and I love children. I really think that I'm called to kids, but all these adults kept coming and making appointments over and over and over when I first started my practice. And I had one child and I had all these adults. And I was praying one day, I'm like, Lord, where's the children? Where are they? And he's like, hey, I want you to minister to the children that are wounded inside of these adults. And
Powerful.
that really, really helped me a lot. Because
Wow.
I think a lot of us have some wounded kids in there that need God's healing.
Awesome. Well, that's a great break. Let's pick up on that when we come back. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of Dr. Laurie Schoessler.
They say the courtroom is where truth comes to light. For one neurosurgeon, it became a test of everything he believed in: his skills, his integrity, his resilience, and his belief in his chosen field. A patient's life forever changed. A Native American husband searching for accountability. A skilled defense attorney trained by the Native American psychologist, and a doctor caught in the middle, fighting to defend not just his actions and his humanity, but medicine in general. Written in real time as the trial proceeded, About Not Losing takes you behind the scenes of a high-stakes malpractice trial, offering a rare look through the eyes of the accused, the attorney fighting by his side, and the psychologist analyzing it all. But this is more than a story about the law. It's a story about the many diverse people involved in a trial. It's also a story of resilience in the face of adversity, of the unlikely friendships that can emerge from conflict, and the strength it takes to move forward when the world seems against you. And even after the trial ended, a recurring dream compelled him to address the lingering questions, turning pain into purpose and closure into a deeper understanding of what truly matters. About Not Losing. A high-stakes trial, life's purpose found. Scan the QR code to get your copy now.
Welcome back to Creating in the Image of God with Dr. Lori Schoessler. Right before the break, we had this amazing transition where we were talking about Dr. Lori's proclivity and the source of her inspiration, the Holy Spirit, and her experiences to work with children, and how now she's working with adults who have childhood wounds, inner children that haven't healed. I can certainly relate to that, as can probably almost everyone in the audience when we stop and think about it. So tell us a little bit about that. What's that like, having that realization and now beginning to practice, with that in mind?
Well, like I said, there's just a lot of things that happen to us along the way, and sometimes it's not even in our formative years. It can be high school, it can be college, and it can be last week, to tell you the truth. But there's that softness inside of us that can get wounded, or that softness inside of us that is carrying a lie-based belief that is causing us to feel the things that we feel and then act the way that we act, make the decisions that we're deciding to do. Being able to admit those things, um, actually trace them, trace the pain. I trace a lot of pain, and well, why do you feel that way? And what belief is there? What is causing you to believe that? Just following that pain, getting those eureka moments of, oh, that's what it is. That's what it is. And then being able to take that back to the feet of Jesus, seeing what he wants to say about that. What do you want to say to Wade about that lie-based belief? And allowing him, inviting him into that and changing it, and then freeing that person to be able to walk out differently, make different choices, having different feelings, and being set free from those things.
Yeah, what comes to mind is that famous saying, um, the definition of insanity, right? To keep
Mm-hmm.
doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome. And
Yeah.
it's not so much that people expect a different outcome so much as, here I am playing this record again,
Right.
and I don't know how to stop. I don't
Yeah.
know how to do it differently. Why does it have that skip? Why do I feel like the song's moving forward and it jumps back to the
Right.
same thing
Yeah.
over and over again, like a broken record, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it not having that eureka, that aha moment that allows
Mhm.
us to repair that little groove, get past that skip that keeps repeating the same pattern.
Yeah.
Do you have any, like, particularly dramatic story? Obviously, names changed, circumstances to protect the innocent or the guilty. But anything jump out at you that you want to share in terms of that eureka aha moment?
Um, I was going through case studies just to freshen up on some stuff, and there's this little boy that came to me. His parents sent him to me because he was getting kind of feisty at home. He was definitely the alpha between his brother and him, getting kind of bossy. They're like, he's just so bossy. So I did a temperament on him. He was a sanguine in inclusion, and he was also sanguine in affection. And so sanguines have a temperament to them that they can really flare, and they have hot tempers. But when a sanguine um, loses their temper, they're mad for like 5 minutes, but it's just burning hot. Ah! And they say a lot of stuff that they shouldn't. They act away a lot of that they shouldn't. And then after 5 minutes, they're done. Hey, I feel so much better. They walk away and they leave whoever they've just interacted with in shambles. And so,
Burnt by a flamethrower, right?
I have this little bumblebee. In fact, he's quite big. And so I got this bumblebee out, and I'm like, this is my bumblebee friend, and he loves people. He goes from people to people to people all the time, loves them. And he's just looking at the bumblebee, and I'm like, but the bumblebee has a stinger. And I said, have you ever been stung? And he's like, oh yeah, so bad. I'm like, yeah, well, when a bumblebee gets a little agitated and stings someone, he just flies away. He's fine. But what happens to the person that he's left behind? And he's like, oh, they're hurting. Like, yeah, kind of like when you lose your temper. And he's like, oh, but I'm okay. I forget all about it. And I'm like, right, but remember the stinger. And he's like, oh. And really, at that moment, seeing his face when he put the two and two together, that was one of my favorite times when people really get, like I said before, that eureka moment and that just enlightenment. And he got it. He completely got it. And as he was leaving school later on that day, he's like, no stinger, no stinger. Like, right. No stinger.
Yeah. It's funny you use that example because I think it was just yesterday, or no, it was Sunday. I was playing, we have a little basketball court. I was playing with my son, and there was a wasp's nest. Wasp had built a nest around the basket. And I'm like, don't worry, they won't bother you. We're just playing. It wasn't a big wasp nest. There were maybe 4 of them.
Yeah.
And I went, he took his shot and I went up to get the ball and my hand was up there and zap, right? And it was like right here at my wedding ring, right there. And swelled up and really, really hurt. And I'm the kind of like, oh, why are people so afraid of them? So you get stung. It's not like you're going to die unless, of course, but man, that thing really hurt.
Yeah. Yes. Yes,
So,
absolutely.
well, wow. Well, great. It's been so awesome. We do have a couple of minutes left. We can take a look at some of the comments here. But before we do, anything that you want to sort of add to what we've discussed so far before we look at some of these questions?
You asked me where I was going, and
Where you're growing next, right?
yeah, and I'm focusing on my business, but I'm also in the process of writing a parenting book that focuses on temperament as you parent. And so my working title right now are the 5 paths to a child's heart. And it's parenting with temperament. And so that's one of the things that I'm working on right now. And I hope that it will be a benefit to people, as they're parenting their precious little ones.
What is the sort of concept around the structure of the book, the layout, the flow? How are you imagining that, and how far along are you?
I'm not far. I'm actually working on the structure right now. And I would love to use some of my case studies. And so to just kind of tell the story of the case study to begin with, and really kind of root out that one topic that I'm going to be talking about. And I think the first one that I kind of settled on was respect. And it seems like a no-brainer. Of course, I respect my kids, but when they're itty bitties, and you're trying to get things done, it's easy to get kind of sharp with them and frustrated. I remember learning way later than I should have to just give my kids a heads up before I called them up to dinner. I mean, they're downstairs. They're in the middle of this make-believe world that they have been working on for an hour and a half. And they are knee-deep into pirates and princesses and who knows what. And all of a sudden, I'm like, dinner time, and I jerk them out of their little world, and I expect them just to pop right up and run upstairs. And I never give them a moment to just say, hey, we're going to have dinner in 5 minutes. Okay, in 5 minutes, just kind of wrap things up, get your little brain kind of pulled out of this world that you've created. 5 minutes. I learned that way later than I should have. And I like to be given notice before I have to switch gears. But I didn't even think to do that with my kids.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Our kids went to a Montessori school early on.
Mm-hmm.
The Montessori school is really good at that. They understand that especially young children, they get into like super learning mode. And they don't do well with transitions. And some kids do better with transitions
Right.
than others, right? but in that sense, our kids were almost a little bit spoiled. They really got used to having those
Yeah.
transitions, right? They didn't get used to sort of being grabbed by the ear and jerked out and learning to adapt and go along with it, right?
Yeah.
So we've had some challenges because they're so used to the good thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't always give those notices. And
Right.
sometimes we forget, and
Yeah.
sometimes we expect it when we really should give them a little bit more time to transition, right?
Sure.
And we live in this world that runs by the clock, and it's the seconds and the minutes.
Yeah.
And that's not the way a child should have to live.
I know. I know. I hear you.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I was just thinking about that. So there are quite a bit of there's quite a bit of discussion about you sharing those experiences. I'm looking for one here that will get at it. That one of the questions was really, um, as a counselor, I don't think there were several comments, but not quite like this. As a counselor, do you have any recommendations about the therapeutic value of sort of being willing to share those stories? How and when would you encourage somebody to to discuss with somebody or with people about
Yeah.
having those early childhood traumas? Here's one, for example, from Thomas. Trauma can be a prison.
Yeah.
And Stella, sharing it with an audience, you're an angel.
Mhm.
The parents involved, if they learned about it, I bet they would have felt bad for not being there to help. Your parents, was there, did were you, how about your parents forgiving themselves for having allowed you to be in that situation, with the babysitter that, you know what I mean?
Right.
There's a whole lot of stuff around, an experience like this. I remember I had my own situation, and part of my work and my sharing was an autobiographical trilogy. And my dad's initial reaction was, "You're just writing that to hurt people." Nothing could have been farther from the truth,
Right.
but
Right.
that was his reaction.
Yeah. Well,
So, what are your thoughts on sharing publicly, or getting to the point of being able to or willing to talk
yeah.
about those experiences?
Well, I think when it's new and it hasn't been healed, that's the time that you should probably find a good counselor that you can talk to. There's the healing power in admittance, being able to verbalize. Sometimes with childhood trauma, the verbalization is really the first step in being able to bring that healing, because the person isn't even able to verbalize it yet. There's this lie-based belief that if I say it, if I talk about it, it will break me. It will be far more than I could ever handle. I mean, I walked through it once, and I lived through it once. I can't even go to that recess within myself, or it will be my undoing. Well, that's a lie-based belief. And that lie is actually holding the person in bondage, or like someone said, that prison. That trauma is now a prison, and it's that admittance of that, talking of, and that laying down at Jesus's feet, that brings the healing that is necessary. But I would also, you don't want it to make it an identity either. This is not an
Right.
identity of mine. In fact,
There's a razor's edge. There's a
there
fine
is.
line. There's a
There is.
balance of how you
I am
manage
not
through this.
I'm not identified by this. This is
Right.
something that I lived through, and I saw God heal it, and I saw him take all the residue of it completely out of my life. And I think in a situation like this, I'm able to talk about it the way that I am because I have been completely healed of it. But
Well,
I
and by way of personal example, for me and to the taste of many people, we've all been around people where we know they haven't healed, right? And they don't seem to be healing as they
Yes.
talk about it, and they
Yeah.
just, you know what I mean? And that was definitely me. I mean, I described my childhood experiences, and the audience knows I was kidnapped in a domestic kidnapping, smuggled out of the country, separated from both parents.
Oh, goodness.
I describe myself as being wrapped around the axle, right, emotionally, and I couldn't process it or deal with it. And you know, it took a long time for me to get to the point where I feel like there's true healing. And maybe it could have should have been much faster. Maybe that's part of the lesson, because I'm very short on patience to to have much more patience and empathy with others who haven't
Hmm.
healed yet. But
Yeah.
at the same time, there is that your body's natural healing is, it creates a, first the wound gets covered, the bleeding stops, and then
Right.
a scab is formed, and then the heal goes, and eventually it heals, right?
Right. Right.
There's this analogy of picking at the scab or whatever, but
Hmm.
you know, it's a balance. And I guess I will just say here, thank you for dedicating your life to helping people heal. I love the title of this episode, Helping Hearts Heal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll
No,
turn
and
the mic back over to you, to because I kind of interrupted there with my own processing and my own
no, that's
experience.
okay. Someone asked, can you ever be healed? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can be completely healed. I am walking proof that there is no residue. Um, there's no triggers where that's concerned within me. But if someone were to meet with me and be going through the process and they were upset, um, they may see me get a little teary or a little misty with them. But it's not because I'm reliving my own trauma. It's because I am there with them through their trauma. And but yeah, you can be healed. You can be completely healed with no residue with God. I
Yeah,
don't
there's
plan
the
on.
shortest verse in the Bible, right? Isn't that Jesus wept, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But no, healing can come. Yes, with God.
I'm thinking back to that now. I've sat with that verse, and what was he really? What were the tears really for? What were they really about? I mean, at a deep level, and you know what I mean.
Hmm.
He certainly wasn't crying over his own suffering.
No, no. It was most likely the sufferings of those around them or the unbelief of those around him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sadness that, lift up your eyes, look to the hills, right? The hosts of the eternal are there at your disposal. You have the power to call on the Holy Spirit, and with God's help. One of the tagline for the show that I've just recently adopted is simply, you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation.
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
The limitless power of God is at our disposal. And yeah, it moves you to tears that people can't see, that can't tap into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can protect our trauma. We can protect it and nurse it. We can feed it. But we don't have to do that.
Yeah,
There's a better way. God's got a better way.
wonderful. Well, we're out of time. We've managed to get through all these things. There was a little bit of drama, not trauma, but drama at the beginning, because I was on my way back from the airport, arriving late. Thank you so much again, Sandra, for helping get us kickstarted. I'm so glad you were here. And Dr. Lori, what would you like to leave the audience with tonight before we move to the last thing, which is to air the sneak peek?
God's a healer, and he hasn't stopped. He hasn't reserved it for some people and not others. He's the healer. And I truly believe that.
Yeah, it's literally one of the names of God. We were just covering that. We go to a nursing home every Sunday morning, and we had the topic happened to be healing. I just realized that.
Yeah.
So this was in honor of those people too. And in the nursing home, you know, they're maybe not going to heal physically at this point.
Yeah.
But we're helping heal spiritually and transition into whatever's next for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But we literally read that quote, I am the God that heals you, right? And in Hebrew, it literally says, you know, I am Yahweh Rofika. I'm not pronouncing it right? I am the tetragrammaton, the YHWH. I am Yahweh Rofika. It is literally one of the names of God, God the healer.
Yeah. It is who he is. And he loves us.
So thank you, Dr. Lori, so much for being here this evening, for sharing, you know, your deeply personal story, and just to allow us to see how much good has come from that with God's help, and how you're, you know, growing in that direction towards the light so that you can be of service to others and helping do the work of God, which is to heal in this case, in this instance.
Thank you for
So
having.
once again, what's that website? Is it New Leaf Christian?
newleafchristiancounseling.net.
And they can get in touch with you by going to that website.
Yeah, there's a big button there, and it takes you right to me.
And is that the correct spelling?
New Leaf Christian Counseling, yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again. And to everyone else, remember, you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. We're going to go now to a sneak peek to share with you who's going to be on next week. And we'll be signing off here. See you next week at 8 p.m. for Created in the Image of God. Hey everyone, it's Wade Franson with a sneak peek of our upcoming show, August 12th, with elderly care provider, technology guru, and musical creator, Dominic Pettig. To start, we're going to have him just share a little snippet, soundbite of one of his creations. We asked Dominic to create something with a hymn-like quality, and he did. You're going to want to hear a lot more of that. Welcome to the studio, Dominic.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm glad to be here.
We often do the sneak peek before the show, but because you're in Germany and it's going to be airing in the middle of the night, we pre-recorded it. So I already prophetically know what's coming up. And for the guests, it's going to be awesome. We're going to learn a lot about your life and your experiences. So Dominic, share with the guests what it was like being on the show and what you learned from your time recording the show.
Yeah, it was amazing being on the show with you, Wade, and I really had a nice time. We found out we had a lot in common in between our past life that we have. And yeah, we connected on a deeply spiritual level, I think, and we listened to a lot of music.
And in this show, we're
about.
going to, explore the intersection between service to humanity, growing up, and you know, some of the troubles of childhood, especially when experiencing divorce, and then how this connection with technology, music, and service to the elderly has helped you find peace and a very positive place now in northern Germany. Share with the audience briefly the effect that creating this music has on you, as well as the listeners.
Yeah, it really opened up my feelings, and I had so much a good time doing these tracks. And it's my thoughts that I put in these lyrics and created this sound wave that just give me good feelings. That's what it does.
And good feelings in contrast, even some of the music styles and so forth that are appealing are sometimes used to convey negative messages, which are discouraging and disheartening. And you've taken the opposite approach.
Truth. And even if it mentions like stuff that might be negative, it's still doing a good thing, releasing this energy with the music in your body and soul. And I think for me, it always helps me listening to the tracks and adjusting me to the feeling, I think.
Well, that's the sneak peek for today. Please do tune in this coming week, 8 p.m. Central Time, Tuesday night, August 12th, for Created in the Image of God with musician Dominic Pettig. We'll see you there.